So, welcome to the film panel this afternoon, and a very, very warm welcome to all of our speakers today. We've got Anna Keeley, who is a film producer's assistant at Escape Plan Productions, Roly Witherow, who composes music for TV and film, and also Heather Noble, who is a freelance art director for films such as Gravity, Beauty and the Beast, and the Fast and the Furious franchise. So as I said, we're going to start with each speaker talking briefly about their role, and we'll start with Heather. Over to you.
Hi, hello. So yes, I'm an art director and I work in film and streaming TV, so the big Netflix type productions, usually big budget stuff, although I enjoy a few medium budget projects as well. And as art director, I work in the art department, which is one of 4 departments that work together to conceptualize, design, and deliver all of the sets and locations that we use for the film shoot. So I'd like to say that I design the sets. I have some design input, but the creative vision always comes from the production designer, who is my boss. I take his or her vision, and it's my job to then figure out what that particular set is in reality. You know, if it's a Victorian pub, for instance, well, how big is the room? What's the exact footage of the room? How high is the bar? How many beer pumps does it have on it? What do the windows look like? So I'm applying architectural knowledge to try and figure out what everything looks like exactly, and how big everything is, how it's all suited together. I have to liaise with other departments, because if the stunts department are going to throw a few stuntmen around this set, then they probably want some soft surfaces, or they want some glass that will break, or they might want some of the furniture in particular spots. So likewise with lighting, have to work in their input where they need lights, and all the other departments kind of feed into this thing. And then I produce a series of technical drawings, which are like architectural blueprints. They go to our construction department, our carpenters and plasterers and painters who build this thing. And it's my job to oversee that build, make sure that everything is being built in the way that I want, and more importantly, finished in the way that I want. So that everything doesn't look brand new. We need to age it all down and make it look grubby and old often. And then I manage that whole build process, because there will be other departments that need access to the set that we're building. You know, people need to come in and do their work on it as well. So we want to make sure we're not tripping over each other. And then I deliver it to the shooting crew on the day of the shoot. So it's quite a long multidisciplinary process. I will generally do 3 or 4 similar sets during the course of a film. But it's got lots of variety, and I really enjoy it. Brilliant. Is there anything else you want me to cover, Catherine?
No, that's a really great introduction of what you do and how it fits in. Over to Roly next.
Oh, here we go. So I work in post-production, which is the sort of the final phase of the timeline of the production of a film, alongside the departments of editing and sound design. So the music department sometimes sort of coordinates with editing and sound design, and sometimes it's just sort of completely on its own. By the time I start working on a film, it's basically been made, in the sense that it's already been shot. Sometimes it's the edit is still going on. Sometimes the edit has been locked. It kind of depends on the process for each particular project. Sometimes I get on board a project if I sort of know the director particularly well. I'll get on board in pre-production, which is nice, because then I can take a look at the script, and then sometimes ideas will start to form just from reading the script, and that's quite nice. But it doesn't always happen that way. So once I've seen the film, the most important thing is to just talk about the film before even talking about the music. So discussing with the director and the producer about what their vision is, and what the characters are thinking at each moment in each scene, what they imagine the role of the music to be, whether it has like a particular should have like a particular narrative device, or whether it's just supporting the drama. I mean, it could have lots of different roles. And we'll also discuss the in and out points of the music. So we'll come up with like a cue sheet. That's basically just a list of the tracks and what each track is doing. And then I will start writing music, and that really, the process for that varies a lot. So it could be that I am starting with like piano or guitar, which are the instruments that I play, or I could be starting with some synthesizers or with digital instruments. There's really I don't really have a fixed way of going about it, and that's partially because each score is quite different. So that's something that I really like. So for example, one film I did, the director wanted it to have Filipino music, and I didn't know anything about Filipino music, so I sort of went away and researched what different types of Filipino music there are, and I really like that part of the process, because you're always just you're learning so many new things. Or each project, I always learn a lot, and I really like that. So I'll do little sketches that I'll send to the director, and then the director, sometimes it takes a few goes to get it right, and sometimes you get it right the first time, although first time is pretty rare. Second time happens, first time is very rare. And sometimes you need to record live instruments as well. So I start using fake instruments, but then I might need to record live instruments on top of that. So then once all of the tracks have been finished, I'll send them on to the sound designer, who will mix them in and create the final soundtrack. And sometimes there's a bit of a communication between me and the sound designer. For example, if the director wants some what's called non-diegetic sound, so like sound effects that aren't coming from within the scene, that could be sort of interfering with the music, and sometimes vice versa. So sometimes music and sound design can work in quite close connection, and it's the same with editing. I would say most of the time I sort of edit my music to the edit, but on occasion, sometimes the director wants me to write a piece of music and then the edit to be edited to the music, which gives it a slightly different feel. And that's the process for like a music video. But yeah, there's a whole different, there are many different processes, and I've sort of outlined the most standard one for me.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Anna, can you give us a quick introduction, please?
Hey everyone, I'm Anna. My pronouns are she, her. I work as a producer's assistant, so I'm the assistant currently to a film producer whose name is Oliver Kassman, and he recently made a film called Saint Maud that came out last year. And I wonder if it might be helpful, just because of being an assistant to a producer at a small company, just to vaguely describe what a production company is, because they really vary in size in the UK industry. So you have a producer being the person that will really be with a film from start to finish, or be with a piece of TV. And so they will have been developing what's called a slate of projects. So that will be the kind of portfolio of projects that they're working on, and develop up a film or a TV show with a writer, and attach a director, or sometimes the writer is the director, and sometimes they come through in different stages. And then we'll oversee, once they've sought finance for a film or a TV show, and once that film or TV show has been financed by an organisation such as Film 4 or the BFI or Netflix or BBC Films, or if it's sought kind of private financing, once it's got the money, the producer will then look to attach all of the heads of department that will make the film what it is creatively, working with the director. And then they will oversee the shoot time, oversee the post-production time, so the edit, sound design, the composition, and stay with the film all the way through it then being taken either to film festivals or distributed, so in cinemas or on streaming platforms, as is now more the case. And And in that process, in the UK industry, you have producers who are literally one person and just starting a company, having made an entire film, bringing all those people together, or that you'll have a production company that have, 10 to 20 to 30 employees, or you'll have massive production companies that are also distribution companies, or they're also streamers like Netflix or Mubi or Sky. And so I'm currently working in a tiny production company, which is I am the assistant to a producer, because at this point he's now expanding his company, and I basically support him with everything that I just described as part of the process. So Oliver currently has projects in development, which is in that stage where they're being written and created and seeking finance. He has soon he'll have a project in production, and he also has projects that are in the delivery stage. So I'm kind of helping with whatever tasks come up from that. But just to give an idea of a few of them, so in the development stage, what I would be doing is reading scripts. So a lot of scripts are sent to production companies, saying this might fit what you like making. And so one of my roles is to read scripts and write script reports. And that's firmly in the development side of things. So you're basically synthesizing to a producer what a script's about, what you thought of it, what kind of tone it had, etc. I would also be keeping a kind of up-to-date database of who's making what in the industry and what kind of new writers or directors are making and what they're looking to make, kind of in terms of whether they'd be working in like a sci-fi genre, or whether they would be working in drama, and whether they're more interested in high budget TV or in kind of lower budget features. So that's some of the roles in the development side. And then in production, those kind of sides has just much more coordination. So that would be liaising with, for example, like heads of departments, such as what Heather or Roly would be doing, would have needs, and I would, as a production assistant, be sometimes in communication with them or liaising with their agents who represent their needs, and then really helping with whatever the producer needs at the time of the production. And then finally, in the stage of post-production, that would be quite very much the same, because there's still lots of things that need coordinating, liaising. I would manage the producer's diary, administrative tasks such as that, and finally helping with things like applications to film festivals or all sorts of those kind of processes. So that's maybe an overview of what I do.
Brilliant, really, really varied. Sounds lovely. All three of our speakers today took a roundabout route to the job that they now have. Both Anna and Heather spent time in development and in VFX, amongst other departments. And I think Roly had several jobs outside of composition before he decided this was the route that he wanted to take. Is this common in the industry? And are there any benefits of moving around a bit early on in your career before you settle?
Shall I?
Yeah, jump in.
Just before Anna really summed up really well the timeline of film production, Anna is working across the whole spectrum from sourcing material, development, pre-production, production, post-production, and distribution, whereas I'm only really pre-production, production, and Roly, I think you're post-production. Is that a fair summary? Yeah. So just so everyone has an idea of our areas of specialty. It's not particularly common to take a circuitous route through the industry. A lot of people come in very driven, they know what they want to be, and they hop on the bottom of the ladder and they work their way up. I personally have suffered from not knowing what I wanted to do until the last 5 years, really. So I've been here, there, and everywhere in lots of departments and different job types. But I would say this, it's cost me time. So when I finally decided that I wanted to start on this route, I was 10 years older than my peers. But it's given me an insight into filmmaking as a whole. And filmmaking, production particularly, is a very collaborative process. All the departments need to feather in, they need to work together smoothly, otherwise, it becomes a car crash. So by working a little bit of visual effects and a little bit of special effects and a little bit of the assistant directors, I have an awareness of what those departments do, what their priorities are, how they function. Plus, also having spent time as a coordinator, I've worked with budgets and schedules in a way that many art directors haven't yet. And so whilst that skill and that awareness wasn't at all relevant when I was a junior draftsman sat at a desk drawing for 10 hours a day, they're becoming more and more relevant as I rise up the ladder. And I think that's always the case. The higher you get, the more of a broad awareness you need of the industry. So I think the moral of the story is, if you do know what you want to do, but you can't get a runner position or a work experience post in that role, in that department, don't be afraid to take, if you want to be a production designer, don't be afraid to do, some work experience in special effects or visual effects, or, do even a junior role in the ADs or props or something else, because it's all useful, valuable experience. It'll all come into play eventually.
Shall I add my perspective on this then? I think in my personal case, I actually needed to try out some other things just to get the sort of motivation and drive and confidence that I needed to sort of be able to throw myself into writing music for film, which was what I'd always wanted to do. I just didn't really feel it was going to be possible. But I do think there are perhaps some advantages to trying some different things, which are, I just think if you're going straight from sort of years and years of academic institutions straight into creative practice, it maybe can be, it just doesn't give you such a broad perspective. And I've certainly found that I've made, contacts and friends through different industries that I've worked in that have proved to be relevant either to my career or just to my way of thinking, which has I think made me a better composer. That's what I would say. I also turned quite late to what I'm doing, and I think there are also benefits to starting earlier, but it's hard to say. It's that thing of what would have an alternative history been? It's hard to say.
I would probably add to that as well, just like sometimes it's not that there's benefits, it's just that it's necessary. So like in terms of finding jobs. So for example, I knew that I would like to try my hand at something like production because I'd heard a producer speak when I was in second year. And they just described like what their skills and their interests were. And I thought, oh, that sounds quite like what I would want to do. But like I'll go on to say, there are so many ways that you can get onto schemes, and I've got loads that I'll share. But sometimes I just found it really hard to find work in some points. And so I didn't see for example, my job before the one I'm doing now, I was working in visual effects as a production assistant there. And that wasn't something I was expecting to do. And it was absolutely amazing. And visual effects, I could talk for days about why as an early entry position, it's quite a good one because it's secure employment that pays well. And it's really exciting. And so many of the large TV series that you see nowadays are starting to be made in virtual ways. So it means that they'll have an element of their production that is shot using LED screens, such as like The Mandalorian, for example. And as that becomes, more popular for high budget TV, I personally find it quite exciting to just even know what visual effects was, because I've never heard of that before, and start to have an idea of how the process goes when you're making like CGI creatures or environments or whatever. And so I guess that's just a thing of like, sometimes you need to find work, and then the work you do find is helpful. So I would add that as well. But I'm definitely at a very earlier stage in terms of that I've done a lot of early entry jobs, because at the moment I don't know exactly what, and I never had that sort of, I know exactly that I want to be this thing. I'd really find it very helpful at the moment to be learning and across those elements of the industry. So hopefully that's a bit reassuring as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. Heather, you mentioned in your bio that you I know you've moved around a lot, but you mentioned that you don't recommend going into the film industry by the back door of running the film studio. Is that one type of role that you wouldn't recommend, and why?
People are welcome to do it if they want to do it. It's gainful employment, but I ended up there because I didn't know how the industry was structured. I just simply didn't know that the people who ran Pinewood Studios weren't the people making the films. So to clarify for anyone else who doesn't know, if you work for Pinewood Studios themselves, for example, then you are running the studios as if it's a hotel. You're providing dressing rooms and sound stages and cleaners and skips and an electrical supply and a switchboard, but you're not making movies. The people that make the movies are these ragtag bands of freelancers that sweep in, take over those facilities and make movies, and then they sweep out when they're finished. So it's yeah, I just didn't know that. So when I sent off my application letter, I sent it to one of the studios and got hired there as office manager. It wasn't particularly interesting, but it was gainful work, and I found out how the facilities are run, which is always valuable. I would say there's a lot more information around now, and it's much easier to access. There are lots of training bodies that can give you the kind of information that I was lacking, if nothing else. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions. There are also more routes in to the filmmaking side of the industry or TV making side of the industry, because it's a lot more accessible, and it's also fiercely busy. So when I was joining, it was hugely competitive to get in, and you needed someone in your family really to or a friend of the family, or you needed a contact. Basically, it was about who you knew. Whereas now we're so busy that we're looking for talented people, we're seeking them out. There just simply isn't enough crew to make all the projects that are in the UK at the moment. So yeah, if you're good, we want you. So it's much easier to get in. But in terms of backdoors, one idea, to be honest, the equivalent backdoor now might be actually to, if you want to be around for pre-production and production, so the shoot and the prep bit that comes just before the shoot, and you're struggling to get a job, you're struggling to find a way in, then there's this whole new department that's opened up, which is the COVID department. And it won't be around for long, but it's not massively popular in terms of people applying. And it's not the most, perhaps, I don't want to dismiss them, but it's not the most rewarding of work, but you're in with the film unit, seeing what goes on. You're talking to every department. So it's a great way in. If you're looking for a backdoor, there is a backdoor still available that's a bit better than my backdoor.
Brilliant, thank you. And Roly and Anna, do either of you know of any other backdoors for your angle on the industry at all?
Well, I think for composing, they're all kind of backdoors in the sense that there's no really established route. I think there are probably three routes in. One is just befriending and meeting directors and producers and sort of working on independent films and starting with small projects and then working on as many as possible of those until one of these directors or producers goes to make something bigger, and then everything builds that way. That's kind of the route that I've taken. There's another route, which is you could become an assistant to another composer, and then they might hand off work to you, or you would just sort of get introduced to their network, and that's a good route. However, in order to do that route, you have to have extremely good technical skills. You have to basically be really, really good at synth programming or MIDI programming, or you have to have really good studio skills. So that's that route. Or the other route, which is also quite common, is you make a name for yourself as a musician in your own right, writing music for yourself, and then people will approach you. That's also a good route.
Thank you. Anna?
Yeah, sure. On the production and development side, I guess, yeah, in terms of the production, getting jobs on sets, exactly like the COVID department is a real thing, and that's what I see come through most. I think really, like in terms of getting a lot of these jobs, because there are starting to be a lot of positions where you don't have to have had loads of experience, because they know that that's the point. And the problem is that if you haven't got loads of experience already, then how do you get that kind of thing? And I mean, I have a list of organizations that send out newsletters that I can share with Catherine, and she can circulate anyway, because the more that I just hear of things, the more these build up, and there actually are so many. But I think just to take away a few useful ones for now, I guess, like for any students that think they may be working in London, then I would sign up to Film London's newsletters. They have something called the Equal Access Network, where they send entry-level jobs out pretty much every 3 days. Often they require quite rapid response times, because often productions are crewing up very quickly, which is a massive problem for example, I have a disability and sometimes I can't respond that quickly. So that's an issue that I try to offset, or at least I was when I was looking for work, that that I'd have my CV ready and updated, and I'd have my LinkedIn ready and updated. But that is a problem that has been being raised and is being addressed. But that is one thing that I would stress. So Film London Equal Access Network. And I would also suggest that you sign up to the Screen Skills newsletters. They also send out loads of entry-level opportunities, again, that I've used a lot. And maybe just to mention one or two more, just so that there's a few, and then I'll circulate the rest with Catherine. I would sign up to the Independent Cinema Office, so that's ICO, to their newsletters, because they send out loads of jobs every couple of days. And then I would also just follow a person on Twitter that's called Rowan Woods, who's made it their life's mission to just circulate entry-level jobs, which is so amazingly kind, because it's a lot of time spent. So those, I guess, would be, because I think that a lot of backdoor conversation, it's like the backdoor is very specific to what background you're from, and I think it's reassuring to know that there are a lot of things being circulated where it's not about who you know. But then I would say, on the other hand, that I think, in reference to that previous question of like, you do a lot of things before you settle in the role you're in now, and for me, a lot of that was actually just I graduated in 2018, so it's been 4 years, and I think it's taken a while to build up a network. But I really do encourage you, like, even if you're not an extroverted person, just when you watch something you like, just really look at the credits and do write to people, because you can usually find contact details. Or if you go to a panel event, if you just send an email to that person, if you can find their email on the job website, and you can usually guess it, because you can usually see a kind of template email they have, and then you can work out what their name is. If you can just feel like you can spend the time and a bit of confidence in sending that email, to just say, hey, like, I'm trying to get into the industry, is there any time I could have 5 minutes of your time on the phone? Usually if someone's been on a panel, they're feeling great because they've engaged with something, and if you then follow up and are just engaging after that, then they're more likely to respond if you just keep your thing super short and ask to just speak on the phone for 5 minutes. And while what they say to you might not be particularly helpful for your circumstances in that given moment, you do slowly start building up just like a name. You see names and you think, oh, I actually chatted to that person very briefly, and then you might feel more confident in 2 years' time to say, hey, I don't know, whatever, something's happened and you've got a skill to offer, or you're looking for a job, and that person remembers. And I think the reason why the conversation about backdoors is very frustrating is because it makes it feel like a completely inaccessible industry. And that's partially because of the structure of the industry, that so much employment is offered by people, for example, in these freelance positions where they need people quickly for short-term contracts, is offering something to people because they can remember the name. And so there is a certain thing of, while that is very inaccessible if you're doing everything through family friends because you've got loads of family friends that work in the film industry, that's very inaccessible. But if you can just be sending your name, you don't need to know people before for that, and that it has to have a bit of tenacity to it, but you don't need to be too extroverted, I don't think, in those contexts. Sorry, that was a really long answer, but I think it's helpful.
Brilliant. I think it was really, really helpful. Thank you. So moving on to a bit about diversity. Heather, you mentioned in your bio an interest in encouraging diversity within the film industry. People who might not have any contacts, people who are neurodiverse, people from backgrounds that might not be represented that much in film. Are there any particular film companies or schemes that you can recommend or advice that you can give around this?
Yeah, it's when I joined the industry, it was 20 years ago, but it was white and middle class, pretty much completely. Everyone around me certainly. And that's changed immensely. We've got some amazing training bodies, and as already mentioned, Screen Skills, I'm going to mention them several times, I think, today. They're doing phenomenal work in getting people in, helping them, and training them to work in the industry. So there, if you're Googling anyone today, I think Screen Skills is the place to start. They've done a lot on diversity. But there are two diversities that I'm particularly interested in that are often overlooked, which is why I raise it. The first is class diversity. I'm of Lincolnshire farming stock myself, so I was greatly helped by having a Cambridge degree, and the fact that I had managed to work through my degree, so I didn't come out in debt. But there are certainly lots of talented individuals who don't live in the traditional home counties with fairly wealthy parents who can support them through 2 weeks or 3 months of work experience, which is the traditional way in. And also getting to events, getting to training events, getting to networking events. I mean, it's the train fare, and if you don't have that wealth behind you, then and you live in Newcastle, then that's a problem. So Screen Skills have, as well as training people and getting them in, they have a bursary scheme, which is amazing. It will pay for the training itself, or it will contribute to the training itself, cost of training itself. But it'll also give you, I believe, travel expenses and accommodation expenses if you're attending an event or a training course. Also, they help you get yourself set up. So they were for a while contributing to the cost of things like laptops and equipment, wet weather gear for if you're standing outside with the shooting crew. They're also helping with the cost of driving lessons, because people not being able to drive is a real problem. It's the first skill you need to work in pre-production and production on the shoot, is to be able to drive, because you're not going to get to where you want to go in the middle of nowhere at 5 a.m. otherwise. So yeah, Screen Skills Bursary is doing great things around class diversity by simply helping with the cost of stuff. And I'm going to be pitching a couple of ideas to my guild as well tonight. So we'll see what we can do on that. And the other one that I'm particularly interested in is neurodiversity, because the industry is still very much set up on a networking basis. So the way to get a job is to network, and the way to get the next job is to be popular. And that's great if you're extrovert, but it's not great if you're introvert. It's certainly not great if you have social anxieties, and it's not great if you're perhaps on the spectrum. So it's really pushing the industry. It's gone a long way, actually. It's much more of a meritocracy than it was. But there's just starting to be some training in the industry about working with people who are neurodiverse, and encouraging and exploiting the talents of people who are neurodiverse, because it is a superpower. And I have been looking at other ways to get my name in people's heads without having to stand in front of them and make small talk at cocktail evenings. It's really, and I've been using LinkedIn for that, to be honest, but it's just finding ways that suit you. If you're struggling to make small talk with people, if that's too terrifying, finding ways to get your name known in the industry enough to get hired and repeatedly hired, that's the challenge. So there's work being done.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And networking doesn't have to mean picking up the phone to somebody or standing in a cocktail bar, having a drink, talking to somebody. Networking can be reaching out by message, via LinkedIn, via Twitter, via social media. So it doesn't have to be as daunting as it can seem. And Anna, the film industry is really well known for its long and unsociable hours, really tight schedules, as you were mentioning earlier, Can you talk to us a little bit about how you've navigated the film industry with a disability, and whether or not there are any companies that have put in adjustments for you along those lines?
Yeah, I think where to start is a minefield. Where shall I start with this one? I mean, so I'll start with the really exciting stuff, because that's what I'm most excited about, which is that there is a massive campaign at the moment that's just been launched called Underlying Health Condition. And anyone who is disabled or neurodivergent, or anyone who is interested in these topics, I really recommend looking up Underlying Health Condition. It's a campaign that's being spearheaded by Jack Thorne, who is a screenwriter who, amongst lots of other things, he wrote the adaptation of his Dark Materials, and various other kind of key disabled members of the like high budget TV industry. They wrote a report that they launched in December that's called Everybody Forgot About the Toilets, and it's worth reading if you're interested. But I think what's exciting is that they're really making pretty awesome demands about key demands, that financial demands, basically, to make the industry more accessible, that would touch on things like hours, touch on things that Heather's just mentioned regarding networking, and that touch on key things around reasonable adjustments. So as you disabled students in the audience will have known about the disability student allowance, and then once you're working, there is access to work. And so, for example, I use Access to Work, and they provide adjustments and equipment, and they also provide disability awareness training to managers. But the problem is, if you're a freelancer and you're working on a project really quickly with a quite quick turnaround time, then Access to Work, they can take up to 3 months to process the applications, and it's really not helpful. So Underlying Health Condition, the campaign, have made one of their key demands that they will that they demand freelancers sort of equivalent, a freelancers fund that would provide so much of the stuff that Heather's covered as well, for kind of class diversity as well from Screen Skills, but more in a disability arena. And then what they've also campaigning really hard for is having each production of a large TV show having a position that's called an accessibility coordinator, who is in charge of ensuring that the production are providing all of the adjustments for all of the crew. And that also covers hidden disabilities and things to do with stress and mental health. And so I'm really excited about that. And that's quite, I mean, these things have been talked about for ages, but the report was launched and the campaign was launched in December. So I think, yeah, it feels like there's exciting momentum, and I don't know what Heather would add to that, but from that point of view. But that's really exciting. And yeah, and as an example, that in my current job, so I've used Access to Work, and I have those adjustments. And I think I would just make a plug for several organisations again that are worth looking at if you're a disabled student and looking for work in the film industry or TV industry. There is an organisation called DANC, D-A-N-C, who they have a amazing newsletter, sending jobs again, and opportunities and events and masterclasses and groups. And they also have a new database thing called Talent Finder. I'll write these in the chat. And so if you're a disabled person working in the industry, you can post a profile. And it's also a place that that broadcasters or production companies can go looking for disabled talent. And so I would really recommend making a profile on that if you are a disabled student. And then I would also recommend, as an organisation, again, I'll type it in the chat, that's called DDPTV. And they're another group that circulate loads of opportunities for disabled professionals. So that's DDPTV. Yeah, I think, yeah, sorry, I could ramble about that for a long time.
Brilliant. I think that's really helpful. Thank you. Right. Roly, I'm assuming that all your composition work is on a freelance project by project basis. How do you generate your next projects, and how many are you working on at the same time? Do you juggle multiple projects?
Yes, I do normally juggle multiple projects. I would say up to about 5 at any one go. And that's because some projects have a really long time span. So for example, last year I had a project that lasted about 6 months, and it probably was about 3 months of solid work, but spread across 6 months. And then that was an interactive feature film. But then if short films came along that I was really interested in, I'd take those on as well and find a day of the week here or an afternoon there to work on that. And then also sometimes adverts. I mean, an advert kind of only takes about 3 hours or something to do the first draft. So yeah, I am normally working on multiple projects. At the moment, I'm working on 2 projects. And it's quite nice to just sort of actually alternate your headspace from one project to the next, and it stops you from getting too stuck and too obsessive in one project. So that's quite nice. About how to generate work. So at the moment, I would say for the past couple of years, I haven't really been doing that much networking, just because work now comes to me, which is really nice. But I did put a lot of time and effort into networking at the very beginning, and I really, stalked people and harassed people with my showreel, and I think that's I think that's just what you have to do. And I did, people have been saying there's lots of different ways to network, and that's exactly right. I mean, I went to film festivals and met people in person at the sort of networking events, and that can be hard and awkward, and you have to really sort of rack your brain for what to say. But there are so many other ways to do it. I mean, social media, I've got jobs through Twitter and Facebook before. Yeah, I mean, the most important thing for me was getting my work and understand, finding people that you want to work with, and identifying why you want to work with them, and investing some time into looking at their work and saying, I understand your work. I think we would collaborate well together, and this is why, and sending them some examples of your work. That goes a long way. It's much better to invest time in a potential contact rather than kind of do a scattergun approach and send sort of like BCC emails to people. It doesn't work. You really have to you really have to identify people you think you connect with, and you connect with their work. So that's what I would say about networking. Yeah, it's really important.
Thank you. Both of you, Heather and Anna, both worked as freelancers and in salaried jobs. I'm assuming there are pros and cons to both. Can you outline some of the differences and those pros and cons, and which you would recommend most? Though I should imagine that's a very individual choice. How about Heather first?
I couldn't find my unmute button, sorry. Yes, it's entirely about the kind of person that you are and the situation that you're going to be comfortable in. There are salaried jobs, just to set out that timeline again that Anna set out. So there are salaried jobs in development, and there are salaried jobs in post-production and distribution. But if you're working in pre-production and production, so the shoot itself, so if you're building, in my case, if you're designing and building the sets or filming the film on them, then the likelihood is you're freelance. We're a ragtag band of freelancers. So so for me, in my job, it's really not an option. But the cons of being a freelancer are pretty obvious. First of all, you've got no job security at all. Films can and will fold on a Friday, and your money stops on that Friday or the following Friday if you're particularly lucky. So if you do go freelance, even if you're earning a pittance, you need to be saving. You need to be saving a financial buffer, because times have been good for a very long time, but it doesn't take much for them to go the other way. And we had a big downturn, I don't know, a decade or more ago, and people lost houses and businesses and all manner of things. So it's worth having some savings in your bank. The other con is that there's no one to particularly mentor or develop you. So you have to take that on yourself. You have to, figure out what skills you're going to need in the next job and make sure that you're providing those to yourself. And there's not much in the way of HR to protect you either. Well, there certainly wasn't when I joined. There's a lot more now, actually. They've been pushing that quite a lot. But whether you feel you can particularly use HR, given that you don't want to get blacklisted or you don't want to be, it's still a bit tricky. So it's a bit Wild West at times in terms of the behaviour that's still going on film sets. I am very risk averse. And I'm played with, the fourth con, which is massive, is your mental health. It's being a freelancer is quite an anxiety-inducing situation. You are judged every minute of every day, and you can do 9 months of good work, but people will remember that 10 minutes when you had a meltdown. You have to turn in a great day's work at the end of every day, and so there's quite a lot of anxiety in production. There's quite a lot of imposter syndrome to deal with as well. So what I was going to say was that I am risk averse, and I am a bit spectrumy and played with self-doubt and self-criticism, and so I am not at all suited to be a freelancer, but I've been doing it for 20 years, and there are two big pros, which are the pros that have kept me in the industry. The first is that there's a massive amount of variety to my job, and the learning as well that I do, because every project is different. So particularly for me, looking at set design, I can be researching everything about the art and architecture of Vatican City one year, and then the next project I know every nut and bolt of the International Space Station, and then I know every kind of corbel and cornice of a Jacobean palace, or wartime this and hers, or there's all manner of things that I know far too much about, but that I've just gone onto a job and had to learn it enough to put together a set that doesn't have people phoning in complaining. So there's that, and I love that. I also love the fresh start. Every 6 or 9 months I get new people, new office, new subject matter. It's great. And the other big pro is that it's exhilarating. Making a movie is like staging a bank heist. You get a ragtag band of freelancers, you throw them together, we don't know each other, but we've all got different skills and we all know what each other should be doing, and then we're given not enough time and not enough money to pull off the impossible. No is not an answer. It has to happen. You have to find a way, and it often involves immense ingenuity to kind of get this thing done on time and on budget. And then when it's all over, we all raise the glass and then go off in our separate directions until the next one rolls up. So it's kind of thrilling, and it's a drug. It's a drug, I think. Anyone who's freelancing in the industry, we've all got these dreams of going off and opening a cafe or a flower shop somewhere, but there's something that keeps us in, and I think it's that thrill of the heist.
Wow, you're making me want to come and work for you.
Come work for us.
Anna, what do you think about freelance versus salaried?
I don't think I can top that. That's so comprehensive. I don't feel particularly qualified to speak. I'm kind of so early on in my career, and I've tried both, and both exactly have massive advantages and disadvantages. And I suppose I think maybe just what I felt is that it wasn't something that I ever thought about when I was a student. I hadn't really thought through, like, how do I like to interact with people on a daily basis? Do I prefer exactly having that moment where you all come together and you make something incredible together? Or do I prefer getting to know someone slowly over a time? Or do I want to work in a sort of office style job, whether it's flexible or not? Or do I want to be much more on my feet? And I don't think I'd ever really thought any of that through, because often at Cambridge, because the degree is so centered on the content of your degree, I was very much in the ideas of the whole thing rather than in the material conditions of what a job actually is. And so I think the good thing is you can experiment with both, and I don't know the answer for me yet, and I'm definitely in the process of finding out. But maybe just kind of sitting down when you're feeling calm and thinking through what things you like in terms of how you like to interact with people, and how you like to be taught in a certain way, like what Heather's saying of whether you have someone who's developing you because they work with you every day, or they're identifying areas that they think you could develop in, or whether you like to kind of share in these kind of incredible short bursts, but you know each other then on into the industry and you can come together with work again. And I think that's a process of finding out what you like through doing, and I definitely sort of at the beginning of that, and I'm really enjoying at the moment the fact of getting to know someone over a period of time, and sort of slowly seeing what skills I prefer, what kind of areas of things I prefer. And but I loved when I was freelancing just the feeling of opportunity that's like comes with the terror of of not knowing what's going to happen. But you know, when you get, like I mentioned, these various job newsletters that hopefully you'll sign up to, a lot comes in at the moment because there's loads of TV being made in the UK, and films, but more, you know, TV is booming, and you don't really want to you know, it's very exciting if you're a freelancer to be able to think, oh, I could do that, and can I make that work, and that kind of thing. So I think there are massive advantages to both, and often in the early stage, and I don't know, at least for me, what I was finding is it's a financial choice of what you can take risk wise. And so I know my friends who are trying to work in the film industry and are still freelancing, and more in a sort of trying to write or direct capacity. A lot of them are tutoring or doing other work alongside. And I think I probably was from a background where I was very scared to not have a job that was very obvious what the job was. And the idea of freelancing was nerve-wracking, but more for so I don't know. I think he's working out. Sorry, that's quite roundabout.
Brilliant, thank you. Quite a lot of our students talk about being tempted to do a postgraduate course in film, either in production or in film composition. Do you think having a postgraduate course of that nature is going to give you any edge, make you more competitive when getting in the industry? And if you can jump in on that one.
I could certainly speak for the music for film. So I would say it depends what your other options are. I mean, it could be a good option to do say a master's in composition for film. I did one at City University, and it wasn't a particularly good course, but it was only a year long, and I wanted to do something short, and it sort of taught me some technical skills in 9 months that it probably would have taken 2 or 3 years for me to learn. But I really don't feel like it taught me how to write music for film. That's not really going to happen. You kind of got to be doing that already. And it definitely didn't help me to get any contacts. I would say the only course where you're going to get contacts is the NFTS. So the NFTS does very, very good master's courses. They're 2 years long. They're extremely expensive, about £30,000. And everyone who goes there is already really good at what they do. And it's a big networking bubble, basically, where people meet directors and producers, and they're I would say, almost guaranteed to go into like full-time employment afterwards. But it is 2 years in which you can't take on any work outside of your NFTS projects. So that is a good route. It's definitely it's nowadays much more geared towards TV than film. It's changed a bit. So it depends what kind of interests you most. But from a networking perspective, NFTS is great. Of course, you might also want to, sharpen your creative practice, and then by all means, doing a master's and having feedback from professors is always valuable. But I always think that if you could somehow just have like a kind of collective of other composers that you could do crits and feedback and really candid analysis of each other's work, that would be just as valuable. So it's definitely not necessary, and no one cares where you studied. Honestly, there are people who do what I do that have never been to university. As long as you write music and are into film, that's enough. So it's yeah, it really depends on what you're looking to get and what other sort of options you have available.
Yeah, I'll dive in. I second that it becomes not about where you study, but whether you're good. That's what it's all about. So, I agree that you don't necessarily need a postgraduate qualification. It really depends on the department you're trying to get into. If you're coming into pre-production or production, there are many departments that you don't need specialist skill in that area, technical skill, production, locations. You know, you can just go in as a runner and make tea. I mean, everyone makes tea, regardless of whether you've got a postgraduate degree or not. Go in, make tea, and rise up the ranks. You don't need anything to other than you know, a great interview and some skills like being able to prioritize and juggle and, you know, all that kind of thing. But there are other departments where you need a portfolio and you need some technical skill to get in, even to get in, really. My department is one of them. So when we're bringing in entry-level candidates, we're really looking for, it doesn't have to be a fully fledged portfolio, but we need to be able to see that you can do some technical drawing or that you've got some artistic skill or whatever. So so in that case, any postgraduate training, it really has three aims. The first is to get you some network contacts, because that's always good if you've got a way in. The second is to provide you with the makings of a portfolio, to provide you with some work that you can show at interview. And the third is to provide you with the technical skills that you need to be able to do the job. So in my case, if you wanted to be an art director, you're probably going up the drafting route. So we need to know that you can draw, technical drafting. If you are graduating with an architecture degree from Cambridge, you're probably all set. We take in a lot of architects to the art departments. We like them very much. Come my way. But if you're graduating with another degree, then it might be that you need to do a course to teach you technical drawing or to give you some work that you can show at interview. But that doesn't need to be a kind of year or 2 year course necessarily. Yes, absolutely. NFTS, gold standard, fiercely expensive, very difficult to get into, but you're going to come out with amazing work and great contacts. There are other universities, I think Nottingham Trent, Cardiff, Dundee. There are many that are doing really good courses that we see a lot of people from. But there are also a lot of training bodies in the industry at the moment who are providing short courses as a way to access that kind of skill. So screen skills, obviously. Talking Point is doing great training courses, including entry-level training. The London Film School, creative media skills. There's a guy at Pinewood called Film Design International. He teaches technical drawing. And they might be a 2-hour course or a 2-day course or a 3-month course, but they're not the full-on commitment for a year with all the thousands and thousands of pounds that entails. So there are other ways to build up the skill set.
Thank you very much. I think, Anna, you're going to have to go in a minute, so I think we'll take a couple of the Q questions in the Q&A as they are directed at Anna. Where are we? First of all, what do you mean by the COVID department, Heather? And sorry if this is me being ignorant. And someone else had a linked one of how do you approach COVID departments?
Yeah, so COVID department, it's a new department that's appeared in filmmaking. We came back pretty quickly. So when COVID hit in March 2020, the whole industry shut down on a Friday. I don't know about you guys, but all the work in film production just vanished overnight. We were all out of work for 3 months, but we got back on our feet very quickly. We got back in July actually of 2020, I think I started working again. So it was only 3 months out. But with that came a great onus on productions to keep their crews safe. So we do daily testing, we have strict mask policies, we have distancing policies, we have very careful layouts of offices, and there's all manner of regulations that we're working under. And a department was established to oversee all of that, and they are called COVID departments. So they spend a lot of their time telling people off for not wearing masks, and you have to be quite diplomatic to do that, to get away with that with a HOD, with the head of department. But they also kind of organise the testing and that. So it's not the most glamorous work on a film set, but the joy of it is that you are with the shooting crew, or you are with the prep crew while they're working, and you are in contact with them on a daily basis, and you can ask questions and get your name known quite easily. So it's a way in. If you're applying, if you found out about a job that's a project that's starting up, and maybe you've applied to the art department, or you've applied to sound or lighting or whatever, and you just can't find a position on that, then you could always ask whether there are any openings in the COVID department. You know, they might just need some extra bodies to help with that. So it's just another backdoor that I could think of, really. I'm not recommending it unless you particularly want to go down that route. It's a great job, but it won't be around forever. It's just a backdoor, another way in, really.
Brilliant, thank you. And there's another question before you go about how do you put together a show reel, or how do you put together a show reel, either for composition or for an art department or any other department? They're just saying, how do you get that kick-started?
I'll let Roly talk about show reels. I'll talk about portfolios. So if you're joining in an entry-level position, we just want to see your work. So we just want some examples of your work, and maybe you're great at sketching or wonderful at painting. Ideally, you might be good at technical drawing as well. We just want to see some examples of that. Now, some people carry around big black folders with nice printouts in them. That's great. I personally have shrunk to an A3 folder with my printouts in because I still like paper. But a lot of people are doing it on an iPad now. I think, swings and roundabouts, really. It's not always easy to see what you're looking at on an iPad. But yes, it can certainly, in the initial stages, we're not looking for a fully fledged portfolio. We're just looking to what you can do. Show us what you can do. So if you've done an architecture degree and you've done a project where you've worked up, you've had an idea, you've conceptualized it, you've done a white card model of it, and you've done some technical drawings, and then you've built it, or whatever it may be, then put all of that in. We love that progression through a project. That's great. But if you haven't done an architecture degree, or you haven't done any technical drafting work, but you're really good at painting, or you enjoy craft work or whatever, then give us some images of that, something to talk about, something to show off your skills. That's what we're really looking for.
Brilliant, thank you. Heather, I'm looking at the clock behind you, thinking that you probably need to go quite soon. We'll carry on the Q&A, but thank you so much for your contribution today. You've been very generous with your time. Thank you.
Not at all. Thank you for letting me go. I'm sorry to skip out early, everybody, but I am available. If anyone has any questions that I can answer, Catherine, then just forward them to me. I'm more than happy to. And I'll send you some links as well.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Hi, Heather.
Roly, have you got anything on creating a portfolio if you want to go in from a composition angle?
Yeah, definitely. So, so when I say showreel, I also mean portfolio. Some people will make a sort of one video, which is kind of like a medley of different scenes that they've put music to, but I wouldn't recommend that because, you'll be sort of jumping in between different styles of music maybe, and it might be a bit jarring. I would have a few scenes, and it is important to demonstrate not just music on its own, but music to picture. So if you don't have any examples of music that you've written to picture, then, find some scenes from films that already exist and rescore them, or, find some animations or whatever it is. You need to demonstrate what your music is doing to those images. It's also okay to have some music, on its own. That's nice to see. It's also important to remember who you're communicating to. So, the people that you want to show your music to are normally not musicians. They're, directors. So you need to be thinking, if you're talking about it, you need to be thinking about what the music is doing to the characters and the story. And you probably want to be talking less about you know, the harmony and the counterpoint and all the technical musical stuff. And I do also think it's a good idea to, you know, write a little bit about yourself to accompany it. But in terms of the format, you know, a website is useful, and yeah, examples of your work to picture.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Anna, there's a specific question for you. This person wondered how you got the role as production and development assistant at Agenica Bengala. Did you have experience working on film while studying at Cambridge, in or outside of your degree? They studied MML at a similar time to you, and is always interested to hear how people got into such interesting careers.
Yeah, so let's see. The job that I did at Agencia Bengala in Mexico City, I was going to do on my year abroad, and then I didn't do a year abroad because I had to take a year out of uni, so that was so when I graduated, I went to Mexico and did that job. And basically, when I was planning my year abroad, I wrote to loads of film companies in Latin America because I was studying Spanish, which was a very good thing to do. But unfortunately, how the actual position came for my year abroad position there and the internship was because my cousin was at uni with a Venezuelan woman who was then a journalist working in Mexico, and put me in touch with a film company there. So that was through a very, very tenuous connection. And it's why I kind of do say that, you know, if you're trying to look, I mean, this is for organizing a year abroad, it's just like constantly writing to people. So that is how I got the position at Agencia Bengala, and where I went after graduating. That's the job I did instead of my year abroad.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a question about transferring into film and TV, transferring laterally from something like media consulting. Might that route be another easy route in, or easy route in, but might that be another way in through the back door? Rather than starting right at runner job level.
Roly, would you want to answer first?
I feel totally unqualified to answer this question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I probably would be unqualified as well because I'm fairly early stage. But like I would say that I'm not sure about media consulting as per se, but I know that if you're talking from like an advertising perspective, for example, a lot of like the really, really exciting directors are working either in advertising or music videos. It's a lot quicker, faster moving, and there's a lot of money in it. And so it is really worth, like if you're working in advertising, I think I'd never be qualified to say that it's a way to move laterally into the industry, but I know that they really are overlapping in the sense of the directors and the crew working, and so having those sorts of that understanding of that world, I think, is helpful. But I wouldn't be able to say whether that is something that's kind of a surefire way to move laterally.
I think it might help you move laterally into the business side, maybe the financial side of running a set or running a production company. Media consultancy is not going to give you creativity, because the creative organizations don't come to a consultancy to say, hey, we're not creative enough, can you help us? They come with their business problems saying, can you help us sort out our logistics, our structure, our financing, that side of things. So it might help you transfer into the business corporate roles, but probably not into the creative production roles.
I would add to that as well that that there is the entire kind of legal, finance, sales and business side. And for example, the NFTS, the course that the school that Roly mentioned, I know that the producing cohort each year, it takes about 20 students or 15 students for producing, and quite a few of them will come from backgrounds of having worked in law or kind of something else that gives a good business oversight, because obviously that's an essential part of the industry, and all of the large companies have their sales and their finance and legal and compliance and everything.
Yeah, thank you. There's a question around, does it matter what degree you have? If you're doing a history degree, a geography degree, a science degree, does it matter if you're applying for jobs in this sector? Or do you have to have a related?
I would say you don't even need to have a degree, probably. I mean, there, I know loads of people. I work with lots of people who don't have degrees, and it just doesn't really come up what university you did or what subject you studied at university. I think the most important thing, well, for music and for maybe directors as well, is getting that portfolio of work. Perhaps for production it's slightly different. I'm not entirely sure.
So for example, with I noticed in the chat as well, there's a question about jobs in development. So for example, Film 4, which is one of the large kind of film financiers in the UK and also work in development, they're advertising a position now that the closing deadline is, I think, the 10th of February, so 2 days time. And that is a development assistant position. And I think, I'm not sure if they're, sorry, I'll get confused because there are a lot of development assistant positions being advertised at present. And I know that 1 or 2 that I've seen say that you need a university degree, and then lots of them don't. So I think development, you'll find that there is a requirement for a BA because of the focus on critical writing. And I think that is probably more common, but I would agree with Roly that I don't really see, on a lot of the jobs that I've seen over my time, I don't think you need a degree, let alone to have a specific degree.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think I'm going to ask the question you just seen. Anna, this person's interested in script development and commissioning. How did you end up with Oliver? Did you approach him or vice versa? And how would you approach a production company if they're interested in a similar kind of work?
Yes, definitely. So how I ended up with Oliver is that my former job that I did was producing the film festival that's in Cambridge called Water Sprite Film Festival. So that's a student, I imagine some of you will know it, but it's a student-run film festival that happens in Cambridge every year. And they have a full-time member of staff that essentially, well, the main role is seeking the finance for the festival. So it's pitching sponsorship and doing public funding applications. And I had volunteered for Water Sprite as when I was in 4th year in the partnerships team. So I'd got quite used to and interested in this idea of how you pitch stuff to people when it comes to supporting new filmmakers. And then a couple of years later, I got the job producing Water Sprite. And what I did for that was I had to network a lot in the industry, basically to raise funds for the festival, and then also to help source speakers and provide ambassadors for the festival. And so through that, I reached out to Oliver Kassman, who I work for now, as one of many producers that was coming to either speak at the festival. He spoke in the 2020 festival. And then when I was later on, when I was a freelancer, I wrote to so many producers saying, do you need a runner? Have you got anything going into production? And at that point, I didn't have enough understanding of the film industry to know that often what is the case is that up and coming producers are starting to need assistance. And what they're also often needing is a freelance script reader. So I would suggest, if you're interested in development or commissioning, that this thing of script reading freelance is really, really helpful. And what happened is that, so I wrote to a lot of people saying that, do you need a runner? And then most came back saying no. And then Oliver Kassman came back in January of last year needing a script reader. And so I did some freelance script reading for him. And then I went and worked in VFX. And then he needed an assistant later. And so I then became his assistant in September of this year just gone. So that is a thing of of writing to networks and just checking when it's a case of production companies and producers, is checking whether they need people. Just dropping your CV and saying if you need a runner, if you need a script reader. But I would say regarding production companies, definitely, I think it's really worth getting in touch. And production companies will always say, we're not looking for unsolicited scripts, and that's to writers. But you know, they have like such busy task loads, and they can't say that they're looking for anything. But I do think it's still worth writing to them, because you never ever know when you're going to hit someone at the time where they really just have too many scripts in their inbox and they need someone to read them for them. And that can be a source of freelance work. It can also help have some experience to then look for further development roles, or look at commissioning. And then regarding commissioning, I think I would really recommend that you sign up to the BBC Careers website and to 4Talent, so that's Channel 4's careers website, and then to all of the kind of the other broadcasters, because they do advertise junior roles. They're relatively rare, but they do them, and so it's worth having an eye over that, of when they'll have kind of entry level for script reading. And the other thing that they'll also advertise, I think one came through yesterday, I saw, that maybe helps with someone who's asked a question about children's TV, that was, and being the assistant to the to someone who's working in quite a senior position at the BBC in one of the children's sectors. So there are these entry level positions, and just finding out where they are and being abreast of them is really helpful.
Thank you. And this is one for you, Roly. What's a good first step into the industry from the position of a composer?
So I do think there are a few different routes in, but I think in all cases, you're not going to get hired without a portfolio. So that's really the most important thing, is putting together a portfolio. I also think, so I noticed someone else has asked about getting involved with film at Cambridge. I mean, that would be a great first step. If you're currently at Cambridge and you know of anybody making a film, ask them if they want music. And, you know, those people that might become, you know, very successful directors and producers. And if it's not film, it could be theatre. You know, you could write incidental music for theatre, and there's some crossover there between film. So just try and get on board a load of projects. I think that's the first step. I mean, I think you before you start contacting people, you need something to contact them with. So get your portfolio together and try and work on student projects whilst you're at Cambridge, if you can.
Thank you. Not sure if anyone's going to be able to answer this one, but how could you use knowledge of foreign languages to your advantage in the film industry?
I did modern languages at undergrad, and I networked in Spain, and I sort of got in with a group of filmmakers, and I have done a few films working in Spanish, including one that's now on Netflix called Try. So it's, you know, it basically opens you up to productions in other countries. So I think it's great. I think it can really amplify the number of people you can work with.
Anna, have you used yours at all?
Yeah, I would add as well, there's sorry, I'm just the website recommender, but there's another website, and obviously don't look at all of these in one go because it's very overwhelming, but it's a website called The Talent Manager, and that's more for TV, and often like factual and entertainment TV, but it covers a lot of bases, and quite often position comes up where it's assistant producer or researcher, or running jobs on things like A Place in the Sun and stuff like that, where it was completely necessary that you spoke Spanish. And there are productions that are abroad advertised on that, and so I think that can be helpful with languages. And then the other thing is, in a much more longer term, with a much more longer term perspective, just the fact that as more and more people start, as global English speaking audiences are happy to watch content in all different languages, and that's been quite a big shift in the last kind of 5 years, I think. There much kind of bigger focus in the development and in that kind of what's getting made side of the industry on international productions, or on finding shows that worked really well. For example, I don't know if you know the Spanish series Money Heist, but that that was picked up by Netflix in a certain way and then developed further and made into much more series. And so having an international outlook, I think, is just exciting, because streaming services are meaning that people can watch things from all over the world.
Thank you. Touch very briefly on the children's sector question. How can you get into the children's sector? Animation or no age rating films? Is this any different from everything that you've been talking about so far today?
I don't have that much to say about it, but I would say that I think it works in the same way, other than that there are some, directors and producers who have a kind of specialty in doing children's programs. But essentially, I think it works in the same way, and there'll be lots of directors who are doing both children's, children's shows and adult shows.
Yeah, and that tip that we had way back in the conversation, if you're interested in getting into a particular genre like that, look at the content that already exists, look at who made it, look at the producers that are working on it, and do your networking and try and get in contact with them to sort of shape your early experiences. But don't say no to anything else while waiting for that to happen, because the skills of organizing a production, the logistics, they're going to be the same whether you're making it for children or whether you're making it for adults. So don't say no to experiences along the way. There's another question coming in from somebody who has some experience in more factual, sort of documentary and current affairs with broadcast credits at the self-shooting producer level. They're really keen to move into scripted projects. Is that possible?
I mean, I don't, again, feel like I'm high enough to answer that kind of question. But I would say that like the more and more film companies that I research, just while looking at who's making what, they have a slate that has a lot of people, production companies who traditionally were only making fiction content are now doing both. And so there is a broadening, is all I would be able to say to that. And I do think that the Talent Manager is a website that is helpful in trying to cross those gaps. And I would actually maybe write to the Talent Manager, because they do have big experience in posting positions for factual and documentary, and then considering more and more fictional TV. I know that a Talent Manager, they offer, for example, mentorships that you can apply to, that I applied to one and got a mentor through that. And I think it would just be worth getting in touch with someone there and asking, I'm trying to move from factual into scripted at this level. Is there any of these mentorship schemes or anyone that would offer some advice on that via email or on the phone?
Thank you. I think we're the last, I think we've covered how important it is to get involved in film at Cambridge, and the answer is yes, do. And I think the last question might be outside your experience. How common is it to move laterally between the creative industries, for example, animation or gaming?
So I've worked in gaming. Certainly for composers, it's very common to span all of those industries. I think for other areas, it's not so common. But if you're doing sound design and music, it's very common to do all of those things. And I like working in gaming. It's a slightly different process. You have to write a lot of music, because you're sort of writing music for all the different eventualities in a game. So you have to be able to sort of make minute emotional adjustments to a piece of music to, depending on the outcome of a certain level or whatever. But yeah, it is very common, and there are directors who kind of do both. I think increasingly directors will either will specialize in either film or games, and there's this other sector that's fast growing, which is interactive films, like Black Mirror Bandersnatch, which is somewhere in between a film and a game. And that's very, very popular, and I think it's growing a lot. And especially as Netflix and Amazon are investing in a more advanced game engine, they'll I think you'll start to see more complex interactive films on Netflix and Amazon, and even ones that sort of veer more into gaming. So yes, it is very common, and also that those two things are beginning to be a little bit more blurred.
I would just add again, like another website for this is a thing called Access to VFX, which is this brilliant hub of resources and job opportunities and mentorships again that covers animation, gaming, and visual effects. So that's access:VFX.
Brilliant, thank you. We're going to try and create some kind of handout with all these amazing resources that you've been listing throughout this. We'll try and pull that together into a resource with links that we can circulate, but thank you. Right, I think that was the last of the questions. So thank you both so much. It's been a fascinating hour and a half. You've talked a huge amount. For your time, your knowledge, your insights, and all the wealth of information that you've shared today. It's been a really good session. Thank you.